This is CNA Birds of a Feather. And I'm going to turn it over here. We've got David Welch from HeroDevs, and then Jonathan Evans, GitHub, Lisa Olson, Microsoft, and Scott Moore from IBM. And it probably says it up here. Perfect. I'll turn it over.
Let's see. Usually takes. Everybody hear me okay? Good in the back? All right. I have a friend back there to let me know if not. Yeah, my name is David Welch. I am with HeroDevs. I'm going to be the moderator for the talk today. HeroDevs is the newer to the space compared to everybody else on this slide, as you all probably can guess. So, but I just kind of wanted to give some background on this, the talk and kind of where the idea came from. HeroDevs became a CNA in October of last year, and joining the program was really cool. We learned a lot about it. I thought I knew how CVE project works. I realized I have no idea. I'm still learning new stuff every day. And, you know, as I learn more and get more involved, there's lots of ways for everybody to contribute, right? Everywhere from senior people who have, you know, the loads of experience, or brand new people in college looking for internships, or like code to kind of prove themselves or do issues or anything else. So we kind of approached it from the background of starting to give, you know, a basis through a couple slides, and then share kind of the stories along the way and talk about, round out talking about life as a CNA. By show of hands, how many people here work like directly with a CNA? Like if your company's a CNA and you work in it? Yes. Okay. We're going to go through a lot of stuff, probably a lot faster, but please feel free to raise your hand if you have, you know, context or stories. I haven't been around long enough, so if these guys lie, call them out for it, because I can't do that. So yeah, with that kind of introductions out of the way, I do have a couple fun questions to ask as we go, to throw them off game, because I didn't tell everybody else. And Lisa, can we start with you?
Oh, yeah.
All right. So, and I kind of gave you the heads up on this one, but if you could assign a CVE to anything in life, right? We dropped the technology constraint. It could be like doing the dishes. It could be, you know, the sound your alarm clock makes, or whatever else, right? What would you put a CVE out for? Traffic, not using your blinkers.
Maybe my husband sometimes.
That's cold and also sets the tone. Lisa has kept me on my toes through this. Yeah. It improves over time. It gets much more stable. Yeah, cool. So yeah, part of the way we put this together is we did prepare some slides, and we had just kind of like 2 or 3 calls where we talked about the history of things and whatnot. So we're going to kind of move through those. Everybody, as you have comments, feel free to bring them out, right? And Scott, I think you wanted to start on the beginning, and we're on the beginning. Oh, here's an overview of what we're going to talk through. Sorry, a little bit of the sequencing. So we're going to go through kind of an overview of the CVE program. Since you're pretty much all CNAs, we'll be really quick there. Talk a little bit about the structure of it. Again, we'll go quick, and then we'll just really kind of dig into the history and timeline. And again, I found a lot of things that I didn't know. Everybody that I've talked here to has about it has said it would be nice to know where this came from, or I didn't know that it originated from this, or, you know, I had no idea that CVE and NIST are not the same thing, an organization. So, all right. With that, you want to give us some background on where it came from?
I promise it won't be old man yells at cloud. So biography wise, in 1983, my dad brought home a computer the same year that I saw War Games, which, you know, basically got me extremely interested in the security end of how computers worked, and how everything was talking to each other with code, and, you know, get computer games and control break out of them to see what the code's doing. So I started college in 1992, and I had the idea of I wanted to be a computer hacker. And I found out very quickly that as soon as I started, nothing was encrypted. So I was a very good computer hacker when everybody at the University of Tennessee's password was faculty. As soon as encryption got more popular, I was not as good a hacker anymore. So Through IRC and news groups, I started collecting exploits of, not that I understood how to use them, but I understood how to collect them and how to collect data, and I collected them like baseball cards. So I did that through starting in around 1994, and I did that for several years. This was before search engines, so you couldn't necessarily search, but Yahoo had a directory listing that was curated. So you had to submit links to it. And my quote unquote database, it was just a flat file, but was added to the Yahoo list. So it got a little popular. Not much. It wasn't like Fedors or Root Shell or any of those, but internet security systems called to start a database in 1997. So I had to forgo my senior year of college and turn professional. Started a database in 97, and CVE became a thing in 1999. So in doing this, I had a conversation with a colleague who wrote a really great paper that I wish he was talking here this week, that equated everything to 3 main events, CVE to 3 main events, which was the cuckoo's egg, which if you haven't read it, read it. About the astronomer at Berkeley who discovered KGB spy who had gone through several networks to get information to relay back to the Russians. Just so happens one of the machines he went through was MITRE. Shortly after that, it was the Robert Morris worm who used Finger, and I don't remember if it was SendMail2, but several of the buffer overflows in those programs to go through to measure the size of the internet, right? And then RPC NetStatD buffer overflow, which was 98, I believe. And at that point, MITRE went to their I guess, security scanning guy, David Mann, they said, put a list of all these logs together and try to make a system to correlate all these vulnerabilities to one thing, right? So David Mann, Steve Christie.
Can I just cut in here? There's no centralized way to talk about these, right? Like,
No,
it's
there's
the
not.
attack itself is
There
what.
was 4 main databases they used. They all talked about vulnerabilities, but they didn't match up with each other. There was no identifier for one thing.
Did they have 4 IDs at least, or was it just kind of like
I mean, there was a
tribal
source
knowledge?
ID and a CERT number and a Satan and NetStat or whatever,
Cool.
right? So they wrote a paper enumerating common vulnerability, enumerating, what was it? Enumerating common vulnerabilities?
Yeah, common vulnerability enumeration. Common
And,
vulnerability enumerations. Sorry.
Somehow, 30 years later, I've assigned 2.5% of all the CVEs.
Nice. Yeah, if you didn't hear that, 2.5% of all CVEs go to Scott. So he was the first person I talked to, and it turns out he knew everybody else here. So yeah, so you kind of grew up in the program, right? Like you said, you left senior year of college to do it, and this is exclusively like what you've done is vulnerability.
I ran a vulnerability database for 30 years.
Yeah.
Up until last year when I moved over to the product security side.
Gotcha.
So
Nice. Is it different at all?
I don't have to do a timesheet anymore.
All right. That's the most important perk. That's what everybody in product loves. Cool. So yeah, I think you hit a lot of the milestones on there, but yeah, CVE came out, right? The origination came out of MITRE, right? MITRE is a lot bigger than just CVE, but I didn't know that. I thought it was just a technical organization from the government. Turns out they do all sorts of research and stuff. And yeah, there was where was the talk at? Was it Duke? Where they put the Purdue University, and then everything kind of sprang from there, right? Like,
if MITRE hadn't gone to Dave and been willing to invest, we'd all be issuing serious IDs instead of CVEs.
I'm thankful.
Gene
for that.
Spafford's thing at Purdue, right?
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I'm a big fan of the CVE program and specifically the mission statement, right? Like the one thing that CVEs are for is for identifying, defining, and catalog publicly disclosures, cybersecurity vulnerabilities. This sounds really simple, and in the 6 months that I've been part of the discussions, like I kind of assumed everybody got it, and even I got it, and it's amazing how many times that wedge tries to get opened up to be other things. Right? Whether it's, EOL announcements, right? It was a big thing recently, or, product advertisement and people spamming stuff or everything else. So, all right. So everybody here feel comfortable with what a CNA is? I'm not watching the Discord chat, but I'll leave this up for a second, and the slides are in there. CNAs are basically part of this structure that is on the MITRE website, and I stole, or the CVE project. Basically a way to categorize who can file vulnerabilities in this program, because you can't let everybody do it. And scale is a problem, right? As we talk about the timeline, we'll talk about where scale was a problem too, because I didn't realize some of this. But yeah, so you kind of have your structure of top level roots, right? There's only a few of those for kind of the domains they control. Roots underneath, right? Like all the MITRE more open source stuff. And then the actual CNAs in multitude. We'll talk about the stats of how those numbers have grown in just a little bit. All right. So yeah, so we kind of broke things out into eras. There seemed to be like natural breakpoints where evolutions in the CVE program came from. Scott already hit on some of kind of the early stuff, right? Founded in 99. But the first kind of one that's interesting where it seems like the organization, starts to morph or take a different shape is 2005. From 99 to 2005, the CVE project was fairly small, right? It had a group of people that were dedicated to it, but the board itself was responsible for testing every CVE, right? Which means installing it on hardware when we don't have VMs and all those kind of things. So lots of esoteric things they had to cover ground for, validating it, and then issuing the CVE directly. And I believe this was all mostly like a manual process for it, right?
I was a punk kid who I didn't care.
Cool.
I had a manager that did, luckily, and he Andre Fresh was one of the original editorial board guys who voted on each vulnerability to see if it got a CVE or not.
They
Had I been
started
able-
out as CANs, CANs.
They had
and
candidates,
The board had to test them and vote, and then they became CVEs.
right?
And how big was the board at the time? Was
I
it
don't know,
like,
8 or 10 people? I don't know.
okay, so 8 or 10. All right. So low numbers in the beginning, though, not terribly adopted, but, pretty quickly in first couple of years, it grows and kind of the scale of it gets too big, right? So 2005 era, MITRE gets more involved. The board transitions.
MITRE was
Always involved, but kind of more.
They always ran it. And so it wasn't until 2005 that the first CNA started.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. See, still learning. So yeah, 2005, first CNA started. They start to delegate out. The board is not necessarily responsible for testing everything themselves.
They gave up the whole CAN thing.
Was that a battle getting there on it, or?
It was 2004. They stopped voting. They just let them in.
Gotcha. So yeah, first CNAs kind of evolved then, but there's not a lot of lift there, and the program's still getting out there. It wasn't kind of until 2010 and even 2016, which we'll talk about, where CVE really starts to become more of a household name. It starts to hit open source. 2010 is kind of a watershed moment where there's more reserved CVEs than there are published, meaning, the life cycle of it, right? You reserve a name. Nobody knows what you're going to put on it because you want to do, coordinated vulnerability disclosure, not weaponize it for people. So more than doubled.
Let's be clear on that. There were more CVs reserved and advanced than assigned after the vulnerability was published.
Okay. That's a good distinction on it. So rather than 0-daying everybody, right? There was more reserved CVEs than after the fact.
Well, they weren't necessarily still reserved. They were reserved in advance and then published.
Gotcha.
Right.
Gotcha. Yeah, and that kind of comes up throughout this in some of the conversations too, right? It wasn't uncommon until a certain point that CVEs would get reserved, but nobody would follow, and then they would publish it, right? They publish it through, Microsoft or the leaderboards or the message boards or whatever. But the CVE itself never got updated, right? So you had a lot of floating CVE IDs with no context of what they were.
Right. So when MITRE was doing most of the assignments, MITRE would reserve a CVID for a vulnerability, but then a researcher might publish it and never tell MITRE about it.
Publish it, outside of the CVE project,
Yeah.
right? Like publish it on the website or to customers or whatever, right?
Yeah. And so MITRE, would scrape different sources to find, that information, but, didn't catch everything.
Interesting. So you couldn't, so it was still rudimentary enough that you couldn't go back and talk to the CNAs and say like, hey, you have to give it to us after the fact.
There weren't enough CNAs. MITRE was doing probably 90% of the assignments. Well,
Oh, gotcha.
probably more like 70% of the assignments, but
And it was all still like email at this point, right?
yeah. And the other thing is like MITRE hadn't built up that part of the communication process. Like Microsoft never came and told us that the CVEs were published. We just monitored Microsoft and published them because MITRE was still writing the descriptions up until 2016.
You just got to watch for Patch Tuesday, right?
Exactly.
Lisa runs Patch Tuesday, so it's amazing that she's here today at all.
Yeah.
So.
One of the other things that was a requirement for being a CNA at the time was that we would be able to scrape your website.
Oh, rather than getting it up front, we'll get it after the fact. You just have to put it somewhere.
Right. We have to be able to monitor it so that we know when you've published and
Wow.
when we need to publish.
And to get a number right, there was like someone's personal email at mitre.org or CVE project that you would just email and say, hey, I need 5 CVE numbers, and that was it, right?
Up until like 2011, I think we were using Steve Christie's personal MITRE email.
Yes. So still a mitre.org, but
Yep.
Steve probably doesn't use his email very much still to this day, I would imagine, right? If that was the single repository for him. So cool. So yeah, again, pretty, low tech, community taking care of itself solutions, right?
Yeah. The other thing during that time is that a lot of the CVIDs MITRE assigned, we found through searching the web ourselves. It wasn't somebody coming and asking us to assign.
Oh, really? Sorry. Oh, really is the expression there.
Yeah, that's why the other half before in 2010 was signed after the vulnerability was public is because MITRE was going and finding it.
Gotcha. Kind of coincides with when search engines really did become available too and made it more possible to do that, I bet. But cool. So that brings us then, but so still it's kind of a reactive solution and or best efforts basis. It's not the centralized, kind of source that it is, right? At least for a lot of the technical community out there for identifying vulnerabilities, right? Like you said, like you would go out and find it and create a number for it and put the details in and publish it because somebody didn't think to come to the project and do it. When did that switch? Like when would you say kind of the era?
I mean, it was a progressive thing. Like I said, in 2010, right? Half of them were reserved in advance. I don't know the exact numbers on how much it's,
We'll have a chart
progressed,
actually in a
but-
minute. We'll probably be able to see it in some of the stats.
I believe in 2016, MITRE also stopped proactively assigning.
Okay. Yeah. So 2016. Okay. So let's get into that because that's where a lot of the more modern stuff comes from. And CVE, as I recognize it, right, starts there. So, we'll talk about the expansion of it. Like by 2016, I think there was 45 different CNAs at that point, right? So grew pretty rapidly from there. The second root came aboard, which is CISA, right? The government agency. And CNAs themselves started to file the CVEs under the respective scopes, right? So MITRE and the CVE project kind of take a step back, filter it as it comes through. Is that when the self-service tools and Vulnogram and those kind of things started to come about?
Yep. All of that started getting planned and developed at that time.
You guys didn't want to do it manually still with emails the whole time? Cool. Yeah. Anything else about the era? I feel like there was some good comments in there. Wasn't there? I believe there was a little bit of not necessarily turmoil, but there had been a lack of enthusiasm and involvement from the community.
I'd say since MITRE was doing everything, everybody was frustrated with MITRE because they couldn't possibly do it fast enough. And so there was a lot of discontent around the CVE program. And so it had to change. And so in 2016, the board really decided to federate and give more power to the CNAs. And over time, they've made it easier for the CNAs to really do the work themselves.
Yeah, it's very much like a customer success or customer support team, right? Like nobody shows up necessarily happy there to do it and file the thing, and any sort of bottleneck is going to be the problem, right? Yeah, so, and I think that's also when, was CVD also kind of espoused then and really became a thing, or was it in the spec kind of all along, right? Coordinated vulnerability disclosures, making sure that you inform, you know, all the manufacturers or whoever needs to be warned before the open of the community?
That process was kind of separate and it was going on at the same time, but
Separate
its
from the
own
project
track.
itself.
yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, we got a couple stats and then we'll talk about the modern day. So, and thank you to Lisa, she got these ready. We put them in today. So, yeah, today we've got 447 total partners, 40 countries across the globe. Oh, and then we'll come back to a couple of the other stats. So, yeah, 450 root CNAs, 8 different routes, very active board steering the overall direction with lots of industry representation. And then active working groups and open source repositories. So literally anybody at any stage of your career, if you want to get involved, if you want to see how things are, more importantly, if you don't like how things are going and you have complaints, jump in. They need help.
Has a question.
Yes.
As of this afternoon, 450 CNAs.
Oh, yeah. She snuck up on me earlier too. So
Objects are not allowed around me.
So 400.
Yeah, as of this afternoon, congratulations, 450 CNAs. Yay.
very cool. Yeah, so we'll talk more about the stats, but you know, today or based off 2024, right? That's about 108 CVEs every day published, right? 2024 was the biggest year, over 40,000, right? Like by a decent measure, right? So we're getting better at this, and by getting better, I mean we're putting out more issues, but we're also finding them. So yes, and fixing them. So good job, everybody. Keep it up. Oh, one thing I want to call out here too. You know, this bottom bullet point here, right? The CVE project and the CVE spec is one of the few specifications. Like I tried to research and find a couple other ones, and that has endured 25 plus years of being a community specification with, you know, there's leadership, but it's also, you know, the authority kind of has to come organically, right? Like someone had to plant the flag initially when the project started, right? But then cultivate it, right? And there's lots of groups that have opined and been in the process and out of the process and those kind of things, but it still continues to grow. There's still new needs coming along, right? AI is a hot topic right now from a security standpoint, and being able to track things and categorize them there, as well as tooling, right? I don't know if everybody else hates polling the API to find out the latest thing and checking diffs on GitHub or whatever else you're doing. So those are the areas we want to hear from. If anybody has comments on those now, in Discord, later, if you want to come to the groups, it's a really good topic there. Yeah.
One other interesting metric that Jonathan had actually pointed out to me earlier this week. In 2025, this is so far, at least the first time ever, where we have CNAs that are actually out publishing MITRE for the first time. So in terms of growth, that's pretty huge.
Again, I never know if this is a good stat to brag about or not, right? Like it's a matter of scale, I guess. But yeah, that is cool. The community does seem to be growing, more people. Even in the last month or two on like the CNA Slack, like I feel like I've seen more activity starting to tick up just in my short time there. So very much an alive community, and everyone is very nice, right? I was worried that I didn't know enough when I jumped in, which was definitely true. But people helped me find kind of the areas I naturally could contribute in. So If you're hesitant at all, reach out, join. All right, back to a few more stats. These are really, really tiny, so use the link in the Discord if you want to see it better. But you can see where the graph really starts to change, right? Around 2016, right? The 2016 year still finishes out at 6437. It pretty much doubles the next year at 1983, 1954, something in there. Pretty close to double on it. So, and then from there we keep growing.
A fun fact about that is that the CVE ID used to have only 4 numbers at the end. Kind of when it went to unlimited numbers at the end, that's when the numbers started growing. Funny about that.
Weird, right?
Weird.
I also heard that MITRE was, and the CVE project was, holding back or dismissing CVEs because they were worried about hitting that limit, right?
Stuff.
Yeah, it was a sore subject. So interesting conversations about that. All right. And then, the CNA program. So this is interesting too. We can see that line clearly breaking up there. CNA is added as the blue line, the cumulative is the orange line. So not as much growth last year as I would expect, especially for the number of CVEs published, but it also means that probably a lot of the major people that are in there. Oh, and there's our slide again. All right. Now we're going to open up. This is where we go off-road a little bit. We've got some fun questions in the cannon, but we'd love to hear more from, anybody who's curious about the program in general. Don't feel bad because everybody raised their hand, or most people raise their hand, or discuss pain points and everything else. Yeah, back here in the corner.
Yeah,
I
got
sorry,
it.
sorry, over here.
Do CNAs coordinate between among each other?
Do
And is there a-
CNAs
And is there a quality check?
do CNAs coordinate amongst each other, and is there a quality check?
Lots of CNAs converge on working groups, which is highly encouraged. If you care about quality working group or the automation or the marketing of this program itself, we've got working group, probably 8 working groups, a new AI working group. So there's a lot of coordination there. There's a Slack channel for CNAs, which is fun. And also one of the working groups is called COOP and is run by Todd. And so that's just a place for CNAs to come and hang out and chat about being a CNA. So there is a lot of coordination.
Oh, some non-plant in the audience mentioned that the board has a CNA liaison, and it happens to be MZ, who's where that sound came from. So, yeah, so
The CNA liaison.
yeah, so keeping the board, obviously, there's a lot of pieces at play now. So keep the board up to date and kind of bridging between the two groups is pretty much a full-time job, and MZ does that. We got a question in the back there.
Question from Discord for the panelists about how many number of CVEs do each of your CNAs assign per year?
Ooh, per year.
The highest number for Microsoft was 2020. We assigned just over 1,200. Since then, we're inching back up to 1,200, but I think people had a lot of time to find problems, vulnerabilities during their off time during the pandemic.
Yeah, I'm not going to tell you how many assigned per year because they're not all patched yet, but disclose around 800.
How about GitHub?
I've only been in GitHub a year, so I don't know the full. I was about to say I think it's like 2,200 was last year.
Great.
Before that, I was at MITRE and it was 6,000 or 7,000.
But was it oh yeah, this year though, we're outpacing MITRE already, right? Within the first quarter.
There's a CNA who outpaces MITRE. Yes.
Awesome. Do you know who it is? Can we say?
Patch Stack.
Patch Stack. Sweet.
I think now MITRE writes 17% of the CVEs. It
And-
used to be 100%.
Yeah, and the goal is to keep shrinking that and federate more, right? Where applicable. As far as HeroDevs goes, I don't actually know that stat, partially because we only support. Oh yeah, I've got a friend in the back putting up like 10, but we only support end of life open source software. So usually there's CVEs that exist. If anything, we just got to update the range to like include it so it accurately says it. But we do find the occasional. So
Speaking of open source, do you have any initiatives to help the open source community proactively open up CVEs and make it easier for them? Because they don't have a lot of time. They don't necessarily have a lot of resources, and they may not have the knowledge.
Well,
Yeah.
if your project's on GitHub, you can request a CV through GitHub.
We'll do everything.
Yeah, we manage the
And-
entire process. If it's not on GitHub, talk to Red Hat.
Red Hat is the root for all open source that isn't in anybody else's scope. So you can also always go to Red Hat.
Yeah. This is Dave.
Oh, sorry, just because it's important to clarify this, if you don't mind. Red Hat is a root. Red Hat is the root for CNAs that choose to be under them. If you wish to be a CNA under Red Hat, you can approach them and talk with them about it. If you're open source, you don't have to be under Red Hat. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, that's good to know. Yeah, HeroDevs, we're in a little bit of a different situation too, because again, we don't make anything, right? We build things that people usually already have. But there's an interesting phenomenon where people don't file CVEs anymore for end of life stuff. It's kind of the whole reason we EOL things. So our scope, we really had to figure out a way to like make us fit the program in a way that if the technology originates from, you know, a project that doesn't have a CNA of record and or we can't find them or they're not active or whatever, then we can get involved and help do that. But I will say if you're in any open source project, whether you're on GitHub or not, if you're on GitHub, talk to GitHub. That's good. If not though, we'd love to help. Sorry, what's that? GitLab is also a CNA. So, and if you're not on either of those and company setup, then we should talk. Anybody else? Any other comments on that? Any more questions? A potential question over here. Yeah. Two of them.
Hi. Hi. I have a question actually for my some of my head researchers. So I'm gonna
Yeah.
I'm gonna just read it. So CV identifiers appear to get more frequently assigned without taking actual exploitability into account, resulting in apparent over-reporting of CV identifiers. Are there any intentions to improve the quality of CVs with respect to that and have CNAs account for all the vulnerability aspects like exploitability?
Are you saying that the applicability, the severity of something is a hotly debated issue in pretty much every CV that comes around and everybody who consumes it?
Yeah, I'm not going to call names, but there is specifically one CNA or vendor out there that is really flooding,
Aggressively putting things out.
yeah, and it's and most of them are, you know, rejected by default.
Are
Or
they for specific products or open source products? Can I ask?
Yeah. Okay, so it starts with an L.
Above.
Yeah.
Anyway, so essentially it's about CNAs not doing their job and assigning CVs for garbage. Sorry, his words, not mine. MITRE approves these CNAs. So if a CNA is not working properly, it should be a concern for MITRE.
I think I know who asked the question even, but you know.
So one of the things is, have you brought this up with MITRE? Would be my first question. As far as I know, there's not been any push to require the CNAs validate exploitability before publishing. That would be difficult for many of the CNAs. I would say, you know, the GitHub CNA doesn't validate everything. We assume that the maintainers who request, right, CVs from us have.
I'd say that the CVE program relies on peer pressure to some degree to keep the CVEs at high quality. And this particular CNA that I think you're referring to has gotten a lot of peer pressure lately. And I think that it will work over time, but they might be a little bit stubborn. But
They are.
I think a lot of us try to encourage other CNAs to do the right thing.
Hopefully, thank you.
Madison.
We have the question here. Oh, you're at.
Hi, everybody. My name is Madison. I'm from GitHub. I manage our CNA. I'd say to this point too, if there are CNAs that are actively acting badly and or violating the rules, these are definitely things that we also talk about at the board level and do take action on. There have been CNAs that have been removed from the program in the past. So it's not that these are unheard of by any means. We try to be open and accepting and understand that the program is not perfect either. So we want to improve where we can to better support folks like that. You know, we want to make a determination. Are they making a mistake, or are they trying to fit into a system that was made for them? Should we as CVE be doing something better? So it's really a discussion and a dialogue across all of that. But so I would say if you have any examples of that, definitely let leadership know. These are things that we talk about very, very regularly. These are things that are brought up pretty consistently. And I'm sure if you've identified an issue, there's a good chance somebody else has too. And there's a non-zero chance that we may already be discussing it as well. Oh, that's a good question. What is the best way to notify us?
Hi, sorry, Dave Morse from MITRE. So if you go to cve.org, there's something called the partner list, and you'll find the names of the CNAs on that partner list, and it'll tell you how to contact them. They've either got a contact form or an email and their disclosure policy. It'll also say who is their root. And then you look up that root in the partner list and you use their public contact from the partner page on cve.org. Does that help?
And then I'm going to ask a hotly contested question. I think that the answers. Oh, well,
The questions we had over here got answered
okay.
in the general conversation. Good job.
So if the root doesn't take corrective action or there's still a disagreement, what do we do then? Where do things go from there? It just throw it out. Nobody, the email goes dead and nobody keeps talking.
There's a council of roots. There's a council of roots run by Dave.
Call me for everything. No. So if a root is not doing their job of governance, which is when they agree to be a root, they agree to govern the CNAs under them. Then you go to their top level root. There are only two of those right now, right? MITRE is top level root for many of every partner in a big section of the program. And CISA is a top level root. CISA under DHS with US government is a top level root for a section of CNAs. So the top level roots are required to enforce governance on everybody below them. And then of course, if you're not getting satisfaction with your complaints about that part of the hierarchy, you can go to the CVE board.
Is that email available on the website too? How do you go to the board if you got this? You call Dave. We have his cell phone number on the last slide. Okay, gotcha. It shouldn't dead end there.
Just email Coley at mitre.org and it'll get there.
We're going to get in trouble up here. Question over here.
Sorry, there's one on Discord. Do you all have any examples of CNAs that have been removed from the program?
We might even look to Dave for that. No, maybe.
The thing about removing CNAs is the program always wants to work with you if you want to work with us. And if MITRE reaches out once, twice, 3 times, we give like 6 months. I mean, it's a long period of time, but if they refuse to respond, then we just send an email saying you're out. They can still probably come back because we always give people hugs.
It is a government adjacent organization and project, so it doesn't move fast. You've got time to clean up your behavior. From my point of view, being a newer CNA, there's issues. There's people that don't agree on things, right? There's a Slack for CNAs. So if any of you are not on the CNA Slack, go on there. You can ask questions. It helps you from doing very embarrassing, CVEs that everyone's going to yell at you for. I have not come across or seen very many instances of, disagreements or, unsolvable problems that there's a lot of compromise on. There are a couple things going on recently, but yeah, Microphone.
Oh, yeah. So just a quick question here. So I understand that the board is in charge of leading the direction of the project. There's working groups that you can join to sort of be involved. And then, as you mentioned, there's Slack rooms as well. I guess I'm just curious if there's any other alternative sources or activities that you would recommend CNAs participate in to be more connected with the project or be more affiliated with what's going on in the world of CVE.
How do people get started? You guys are steeped in it, so.
Join. I mean, the fact is that working groups are usually once a week or once every 2 weeks. You can kind of dip in and dip out. And if they're talking about something you're interested in, then by all means get involved and volunteer. The coop is always a good place because basically there's no real requirements. You just got to come and hang out and be friendly with Todd. A CNA, yes, a CNA. But weren't you asking about CNAs? How to get more
Yes,
involved?
from the perspective of a CNA, how will
Yeah.
a CNA be
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
actively involved in the project itself?
The fact is that I'm the co-chair of the TWG. And before I was co-chair of which is the tactical working group, kind of operational thing. And before that, I was involved. I'd go to board meetings because I've been on the board since 2018. But after I really started digging into that working group, I just became more and more enthusiastic and just spend probably more time than Microsoft even would appreciate that I spend on this program, because there's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of shaping the future that you can do if you're active. And if you care about it, jump in.
Okay, wonderful. And I guess slight follow-up to that is that I've seen some surveys come in for CNAs as well. This is the dumb question, but I guess like how heavily are those surveys factored into, the feedback that you receive from those?
Heavily. Yeah.
Sweet. Thank you.
I've been watching those come together for a long time. They're hotly debated and want to be, they wanted to get it really accurate, to the point that there's been several meetings about one question just to get it right, because it's got a whole tree of things. So yeah.
The other thing about participating, if you can't make like the working group meetings, many of the working groups do their work on GitHub. There's several GitHub repos, and if you want to participate through that, they definitely appreciate it.
And if you don't like the technical infrastructure and stuff, like it's all on GitHub. And I was kind of worried it would be a hard project to get into. It's really easy. Like there's not a lot of terribly sophisticated or scary corners to hide out. So you've got no reason to complain without offering a solution, is what I'm saying.
One thing I do now as a CNA is once a month, I'll go back and read the naming rules again so that I don't miss anything. Because there's been times in my career where I go to one of these when we used to just have the summits or whatever, and there was 20 people in a room, and somebody at MITRE would come up and say, you're supposed to be putting versions into the description. It's like, I was? Oh, I'll start doing that now. But keeping up to date with what the board's doing and what the working groups are working on is very, very helpful.
And it's nuanced, so it's easy to slip.
Yeah. The other thing is the minutes for the board meetings are posted, so you can keep up with what the board is thinking about.
And there's not too much information. It's not a lot of fluff. Like when I joined, I was worried that it would be a lot of reading to kind of get to the meat of things, but really easy to jump in. Everybody's really friendly. We need lots of help. Jump in. To the most patient woman in the crowd who has been waiting. For the online Discord people.
Of a consumer of CVE records, I guess I have a general question about how standards are enforced amongst CNA members, how often they change, because it feels like they're changing all the time. And is there are standards coming from the top down and you guys just have to sort of follow them? Or do you guys actually talk amongst yourselves and change things over time?
I have thoughts, but you guys go first.
We periodically rewrite the rules. The latest rules revision took a couple of years to get through because we kind of did a major overhaul of the entire document and structured it differently and had a lot of arguments and that sort of thing. And so that went into effect in August this year. The previous one, I think, was probably 2019. So it's, once every 5 years we change the rules. But now, since we've overhauled the rules this time, I think there's going to be a lot more incremental changes, little baby changes along the way just to make them better, as opposed to, starting another 3-year project.
But you guys don't go back for those changes to old records of old CVEs.
Yeah, I was going to say, are you talking about the schema itself of
That's
the
the
Yeah,
question.
In fact, there's a rule that says these changes should not be backported. So,
but there is some level of grooming every so often, or at least I've heard that there's some level of grooming of data that was bad or would violate it. I'm really glad you asked this, because this was my experience also joining. Like, how does this actually work? And it does seem like things change. While the rules may not have changed in the last 5 years, and maybe some of the nuances did, it's almost like being like a principal of an elementary school, and you're saying everybody wear the same outfit one day, and it's got to be this shade of blue shirt and jeans or whatever. Like, there is a lot of gray area, and no one has to be here and participate, right? There's a level of industry expectation, especially, the more sophisticated you are. But getting everybody to agree, as I'm sure the Discord chat, I can't wait to go back and read it. Getting everybody to agree, even on the same words in the same sentence for something simple, is really, really hard at a global scale. So from my experience on the QWG, which is the Quality Working Group, they've talked about tightening those fields and introducing new ones that are a lot more specific. But it's one of those things that we have to balance with not boxing out people who may only, it's still better to get something, even if it's not totally well formed, than nothing at all. And that's a tipping point.
For the record format, the Quality Working Group has decided that they're not going to be making major version changes no more than every 6 months. Likely it'll be, take longer than that, but.
Hey, yeah, Art's kicking us out, and you have to listen to Art.
Art wants everybody to get out, but we have a lot of questions in Discord. So
can we do give Discord some love?
Yeah.
Who's going to read them?
So one of the questions in the Discord was, generally, what kind of feedback do you get from new CNAs on the state of tools available for creating and managing their assigned CVEs?
I'll start on that one because I'm the new one. I was surprised there's not a lot of tools. There's a ton of bespoke tools that everybody implements. And I think it's also partially because the scope, right, that mission statement is fairly narrow, right, in what the program actually should be. The applicability is huge, but most people are looking for a specific thing in a specific way. And, there's a REST API for CNAs to hit and do things. So you're either using a front-end tool to do it, or you're using the API with scripts. That's been our experience so far. But again, we're still young on the journey. Anybody have other thoughts? John, I feel like from the QWG or the...
Yeah, I'm not sure what new CNAs, like Dave may have a better understanding. So it's what questions around tooling do you get from new CNAs?
Oh, yeah. So when we bring a CNA into the program, the root that's onboarding them goes through the onboarding process where we train them in the basics of setting up a CVE record, what the minimal requirements are, how to format the JSON file. And we do that usually using the Vulnagram tool, which is a friendly GUI-based web-hosted tool for introduction to the process. Then there are other community-created clients you could use, or you could script it to the API directly, whatever you want. The API offers a series of REST endpoint commands. The GUI tools provide an easy way to do it. Vulnagram is a great example. We have a user guide for that. It's on cve.org under services, including client links and videos for how to use Vulnagram and the other clients. So it's pretty friendly to get started. And before we close here, wanted to say that the survey for all people who are here at VulnCon for giving feedback to CVE, great survey, lots of questions. Stop by the front booth in the lobby for CVE. We've got a QR code. Fill in the survey. Tell us what you think.
Yeah, specifically with tooling, I think we have all reinvented the wheel many times over, but it's a pretty small wheel.
We have 2 minutes left. I don't know if there's any short questions in there that can
One
be
last
asked
question?
that can be answered by one person. but we might be able to squeeze it in.
I don't think it's a short question, so I'll ask all four of the panelists to check the Discord and answer as you can. Thank you.
I'll say Vulnergram saved my rear whenever we had a catastrophic lab failure at one point. So Vulnergram is great, and shout out to Sean Dunn.
Vulnergram is great.
Was going to say, if
They'll use
anybody
it.
wants a specific tool and or builds it, wants to share the ownership of it, I think a lot of people would jump on. So raise that up. Again, the Slack channel or the Coop, good places to start.
A lot of information out there in the Discord, so go check it out. And we're going to wrap it up so we can get Art on. Thanks to the panelists. Thanks to everybody who hung out here and
Thank
asked
you.
questions. Good discussion.